Dismiss all. Okay.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Ken. Good morning, Christian.
Good morning.
Morning, everybody. Well, it looks like everybody is here after a long budget week. Thank you all for being here. At this time, we'll call to order the Yamhill County, I was going to say Budget Committee, but that's not where we are today. Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for May 6, 2021. And at this time, we'll start with the pledge. Mr. Huffer, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Well, just a reminder, today is the National Day of Prayer, and it's something that became official in 1952. But this picture always reminds me of just how important prayer is in our country, never more than it is today. That's the prayer at Valley Forge when Washington. And that actually happened. If you read the story about this was a spy who saw him kneeling and praying. Things were so terrible during that winter of 1777, 78. And then there's a miraculous story about a turnaround. So I think it's important for us to remember in the importance of prayer for our country, for healing and for peace in our country. And with that, there is going to be a prayer National Day of Prayer gathering across the street at the courthouse, behind the courthouse today at noon. The Ministerial Alliance of McMinnville is going to be putting this on. They usually do this over by the Civic Center, but today they're going to be right across the street, right off Evans behind the courthouse. So hopefully we'll be done in time and we'll see you over there. Alrighty, so Commissioner Cooley, you've in honor of that, you've asked for a moment of silence on this National Day of Prayer so that we can all pray for our country.
Yes, and thank you, Chair. And also as a way, in preparation for Memorial Day coming up, I asked that we also have a moment of silence for those that we've lost over the course of the pandemic, not just people who died because of COVID, but all the folks in our lives and our communities who it's been very hard to mourn for and remember. So I just asked for a moment of silence for them as well. And if you would like to be the one to lead that, by all means. Sometimes I'm not so good at counting and praying.
Well, you're wanting a moment of silence, and I want to make sure you get to address that and lead that as appropriate. I would love to have a moment to pray. I think it's important for us to remember to ask for God to intervene in the problems that we obviously can't fix on our own. So I think that's important. And yeah, we've seen a lot of tragedy in our community over the last year.
Yes, including just simply people who have died and we haven't been able to mourn them because of restrictions and limitations on visiting and service size. So, well, please join with me then in a moment of silence, honoring both the National Day of Prayer and those that we've lost over the course of the pandemic in the last 14 months. Thank you, fellow commissioners. I really appreciate that.
Thank you all. Well,
Thank you for adding that too.
We don't have to limit our prayers for this country just for the National Day of Prayer. All right, we'll move on to our calendar session, and this is a time for us to look at anything we need to add to our joint calendars. Do we have anything, commissioners?
I don't believe so.
I believe National Day of Prayer service, so hopefully that's on the calendar. I didn't check to see if it was.
And I think we have AOC on Monday.
Yep. And in the middle of that, I apologize. I'll be facilitating the water task force.
Yeah.
But I will be there the rest of it.
And I also want to just say thank you to Christian.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, just a quick reminder, next week we'll have a meeting of the Hospital Facilities Authority at 9:45. And then we'll also have to take some action during the board session at 10 to adopt the financing board order. So I know that we've discussed this a little bit before, but I'm looking primarily at Commissioner Bershauer. This is the first time you've been through this financing process with us. If there are any questions at all, we can certainly arrange to have Greg Blond from our bond counsel speak individually with commissioners who have any questions, or to say something before next Thursday's Hospital Facilities Authority, or provide some additional context during the meeting. They're hoping to close this $150 million bond transaction by June 1st. So that's the need to get this on our agenda and process next week if possible. Just want to put that reminder out there. Thank you.
Oh, and Chair, you're muted, but.
Thank you.
And I also just wanted to add, just on calendar, we've got a number of calendar items I just wanted to have on your radar. I don't have the actual dates in front of me, but I do know that we have both the budget committee meetings for Cove Orchard Sewer District and for the extension service that will be coming up. We also have a request from the city of Newburgh. Doug Rux is needing to make a presentation to provide an update on Newburgh's proposed urban renewal district. We also have several budget adoption hearings in the month of June that'll also be on the calendar. And, so I just wanted to highlight that we're going to try to do our best to get the calendar organized, but we have a lot of items. It's going to be a very busy May and into June as far as calendar items go. So if there's questions or anything, please let me know.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Yes, there seems to be an awful lot going on that requires immediate attention, but we'll do the best we can. But I want to thank everybody who worked on the budget. Chief among them, our administrator, lots and lots of long days and hours. The finance team, our citizen budget committee. We've always had an outstanding group, but this year with Rick John and Denny Elmer and Doreen App, they put in so much time and so much energy into looking at the best ways, the most responsible ways to show stewardship on taxpayer dollars. So I want to thank everybody who, and Carrie and Carolina, just an enormous amount of work over the last few days. So the next item we have is the public comment. We've received public comments. Thank you, Carolina, for sharing those. And on to item F, which is a work session. And this is the time reserved for discussion. And it is on our agenda as a review and discussion of the American Rescue Plan areas of priority. But I think Commissioner Bershauer.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't want to interrupt you. We got some public comment this morning, I believe it came through. And said we were on the email, but I didn't see it come through my email yesterday, but it's regarding the Sheridan Japanese school. So I'm wondering if maybe we could consider that and add it to the agenda. I guess it would be J6. Consideration of that request from Kim Hamblin.
I thank you, Commissioner. I saw that. I'm wondering if that would be more appropriate for us to address as either part of the ARPA discussion or in some other capacity. I'm not sure I understand what discussion we would have today.
I think she's looking for just a letter of support for, the effort to keep that school open. I think that's kind of her first request is, would we sign on to supporting that? I don't think there's a dollar amount.
Okay. I just saw the initial letter. Okay, so we don't have an actual letter, But perhaps what we could do is put on the agenda that a commissioner would write a letter, if you would like to, Commissioner, write a letter in support, and then we can either go ahead and ratify that next week, or then we can go ahead and give Commissioner Berschauer the authority to write a letter and on our behalf in support of supporting the Japanese school.
Chair, I think that sounds like I'm happy with the second one. The email included some sample letters, and I'm assuming that Commissioner Berschauer will probably use something similar to that. I did email the requester just to let her know that since there was a meeting last night, that I was happy to share my own personal support of it. I was worried about it being, the meeting was last night, but as I look more closely, there's also a presentation to the school board, I think on Monday. So this would be, a letter of support would be a good timing for that.
Okay, yes, thank you for bringing that up, commissioners. Appreciate that. All righty, so you want to make that item J under other business, and then we can go ahead and approve that then. Thank you. So as far as the work session goes, we were going to be discussing the American Rescue Plan areas of priority. I'm inclined to say that right now we're speaking more and having discussions more that are general as to the areas of importance, and that specifics, I don't know that we're in the place to actually have a more detailed discussion of anything beyond that. Commissioners?
Thank you, Chair. One thing I was, Ken sent you, I think 2 weeks ago, a proposal for maybe how we could think about it. And it's not from a place of like, there's this policy or this policy, but just, one way for me to wrap my mind around how to set it up so that there's transformational change to, again, quote Commissioner Berschauer, sorry, I heard that, so I wanted to just keep it going, was to identify things within county that or long-term we really need to do to make, to better serve the community, and then external to the county. And I'm realizing that external to the county could be things like, we have a proposal from the food bank to expand their food pantry offerings, but that would be kind of like a short term, and it would be non-economic development related. But then if we wanted to think about business and worker support, we could also think long term. And that kind of realm, I can see Abisha being very helpful with. I'd like to, because I think we need her help in either managing requests for proposals or reaching out to vendors, doing that public outreach, which she's very good at, but limit it to that area so that we're not asking her to do everything. Another way that I thought about this is that once you and I and Commissioner Berschauer, I'm looking at Chair Starrett, sorry. Once Commissioner Berschauer, Chair Starrett, and I decide upon priorities for all the areas, sending out requests for proposals seems like a good start, because even if we can't possibly fund all of the priorities that we have identified and that people bring to us, at least we have a list then of things that we can work through and maybe get other people's eyes on. So I wanted to send some thoughts out to you as a starting point.
Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer?
Thank you, Chair. I think in my mind, I was thinking about this last night, it would be helpful for us to establish maybe a percentage of this initial round one that is going to be used internally versus externally. And I don't know that I can actually come up with that without knowing, internally, and we just went over the budget for the past 3 days, so that's in my mind, but are there things that we can do internally that would alleviate some ongoing yearly line item budget? So for instance, I know I need to replace my roof in 20 years. So I'm stocking away, $1,000 a year or whatever for it. Is there something, are there those types of things where we could just do it and then alleviate some of the pressure over the next 10 to 20 years where, you know, because ultimately taxpayers pay for it all anyway. But that's where my mind was going. You know, is there something that we could get kind of a twofer for, you know, where we get something done that we know needs to be done, but we're also alleviating the budget in the meantime. But without really having a comprehensive list of those ideas, I don't know what percentage I would be comfortable applying internally versus externally. And I saw in the news last night that I think it was the Portland Business Journal that came out and said that over the next 6 months, they expect Oregon to lose a third. You know, from the beginning of the pandemic, we expect to have lost a third of our businesses. That sounded pretty drastic to me, but I've got to go pull that up and look for it. So there's definitely ongoing external needs for our businesses that are also a priority. I'm just, you know, in my head, I can't get to those percentages until we kind of see some ideas internally.
Thank you. Ken, I think this speaks to the necessity for really a whole part of this is looking at the internal projects. That's not something you can just kind of write down and say, you know, we need this, 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 and this. So perhaps you can address the sort of the workload around coming up with a list of priorities internally, and then we can go from there. That would be something that we could look at, not immediate, but down the road.
Correct. And I'm envisioning, because knowing the requirements around the allowable uses of the funds and still pending further information on the restrictions. I do think that there would probably be some value at some point to kind of determine kind of those areas of focus, because we've talked about internal, we've talked about external, we've talked about business recovery, we've talked about infrastructure, you know, to kind of set those, what I call buckets of, to maybe if the board wanted to establish that, and then we could start focusing in on, like, on some of the external stuff. You know, I could see Commissioner Kula mentioned with Abisha and with SEDCOR, maybe more of that focus on that outside, which would be that business recovery, potential grants, you know, depending on what the board is envisioning as priorities on that, because I recognize it's a balancing act, that we're not looking at focusing all these funds on internal needs and that we have, but there's that external component as well that, you know, I see if the board wanted to think about and come back, you know, with some ideas on what they kind of see what each of those buckets look like. And maybe it could be, you know, internal, external, economic recovery, business recovery, infrastructure, and then we can start doing work in each of those categories to help determine what are some of the potential projects, what that's going to look like, start coming up with some projections on dollar amounts. So then you can kind of put percentages to each of those buckets and kind of prioritize where you want to focus the funds. Or you could go the other route and out of the gate, set a percentage for each of those categories. And then that sets some guardrails on, you know, that I'm not going out the door and saying, well, I can spend $20 million and build a new courthouse. I'm just, as an example, that it creates some parameter or guidelines that when we're coming forward with ideas, because keeping in mind that depending on the list, and when you start seeing the items that are coming forward that fall within those categories, then the board can readjust those percentages based on need, prioritization, value, benefit, etc. So I don't know if that helps, but maybe that would be the starting point. And then with Abisha and SEDCOR and when you're talking infrastructure, I know Commissioner Kula mentioned he has a meeting with the Water Task Force, coming up with some ideas and needs that may fall into that infrastructure. those are some other areas that would be included in that.
Thank you, Ken. As far as the restrictions and the requirements, I think that might guide a little bit of what we do going forward. Do we have any anticipated time on when we would get more information?
I keep getting emails that Treasury's coming out with more information, and to date, we still haven't received any further clarification beyond the basics of the responding to or mitigating for a public health emergency with respect to COVID, providing government services to the extent of reduction in revenue, make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Again, it's still that basic criteria, but they haven't, and maybe they're not going to be more restrictive than that. There is that possibility. And so I think it's important. I have to keep going back to that and reminding myself that there are some limitations in place on how we use these funds, and some restrictions in making sure that the ideas or proposals satisfy those requirements, when we're determining what's in each of those. Again, I'll call them the buckets of funding and priorities.
Thank you. Christian.
Yeah, to the extent it's helpful, we're on a conference call with Rob Bovet yesterday. He was giving us a legislative update and also mentioned that apparently they're expecting some additional guidance to come out from the feds no later than May 11th. So I don't know, Ken, you may have known that, or maybe that's a date other dates have come and gone, or however, but he just mentioned that's a date that they're kind of looking towards to hopefully get some additional guidance. So,
well, and that coincides with the anticipated date that the first funding was supposed to be released to jurisdictions.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it's with the check that's in the mail.
Yeah, a check
right.
with a letter, right? Chair, if I may.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Commissioner Bershauer's thoughts around are there budget lines that could be eliminated to alleviate pressure on future budgets, which I think that's what I wrote down, but I think that's what you said. I wonder if that could be the measurement for internal for all projects that come to us. And I realize that that's somewhat restricted in terms of what a department might be thinking about bringing a proposal to us. But it seems like it would be really good guardrails, at least for us, if that was something that we were all willing to agree upon as the requirement for an internal. And I'm thinking of Commissioner Sterrett, you proposed that we table yesterday the additional funding for the finance software. And that's one where I realize it's not going to completely eliminate a budget line, but I'm willing to bet that Ken could make a strong argument that it will reduce our total costs going forward. I'm just willing to bet he could make a pretty strong case for that. So I would just wonder if that's a way to limit the internal, at least. And then maybe we set priorities based upon what we all agree upon is really important county-wide for that external, or for the economic development, or business and worker relief. So
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I think we have that. We reach out to our liaison departments and say, what would be your wish list? And then they say, well, we've got this. But we already have some identified in terms of perhaps capital project or really expensive types of improvements and things. I'm thinking about public health, or I'm thinking about any of the other things that we've really not been able to address because they were so high priced. But I'm sure Ken's got sort of a short list of that we can add to the discussion, even though we don't have to have any specifics, we don't have any design, we don't have any bids, we don't have any dollar amounts, but we know this has been on the back burner for a while. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and that was my thought process, because I'm assuming we're not going to be able to take a portion of this money and just put it into a rainy day fund. And that would probably run contrary to what the public expects us to do. But that was really my purpose, is to see if we can't take some things off the table that would then free up money to do that. I'm not saying go spend it now that we have, higher monthly cash flow, but build up reserves kind of in the back end for something else.
Allowable, Ken, to the degree that it is allowable?
That's a good question, because I know that the funds have to be expended by 2024, and I do think, especially when we're looking at, as an example, like if we're looking at a major capital project, knowing some of the deficiencies and things that we would like to have addressed with the current facility that public health is located, that again, that if we're addressing a facility need, that in turn results in, hopefully some long-term positive benefit because of lessening maintenance requirements and continuing to put Band-Aids on because we have that space needs analysis that really goes into detail about the deficiencies that a number of our facilities had. And as I presented during budget presentations this week, the pandemic didn't necessarily help things. It kind of highlighted again some of the shortcomings with our facilities in complying with a lot of the restrictions and regulations that are in place, where it's really challenging to, because we have a lot of facilities that we have former residences that are being used for commercial use, and so not necessarily designed for that. So it presents some challenges around responding to the pandemic. It creates issues with service delivery and being able to adapt to changing situations and still maintain the high level of services that the community expects from the county. So I do see accomplishing both, where there's some short-term investments that could be made on some internal service areas or capital improvements that then in turn assist with long-term spending and maintenance and improved services that result in cost savings down the road, that cost savings benefit. If that makes sense, because I think that's the direction or the possibility on how that benefit could play out long-term.
So as far as a timeline on this, this is something we really need to spend some time on. I know people are approaching us and we've had legislators say, hey, I've got this pot of money, what do you want? But I need to know right now. So I want to make sure that we're really, really spending the appropriate amount of time on these discussions. So Ken, your advice on when we would be able to come back and have more detailed discussions on this. I know we've got a pretty packed schedule going forward for the next few weeks. And I know that to ask you to come up with, okay, give us a short list of internal and perhaps capital projects. I'm wondering if maybe we could take a look at that space needs analysis in light of what we might want to spend, and also see how that would factor in. Look at our community partners and what their needs are, and then again the big infrastructure, and in partnering with the cities, because we're going to need to know what they're going to be putting towards their projects. They've got some big ticket items that they've got need for, but they also are going to be getting their own pot of money. So once we know, we'll be able to see how much we would be able to add to that. So time-wise, what does it look like realistically?
Well, I think realistically, I think the biggest question that's out there that would be a driver on timing would be whether or not there are immediate needs, or if the board wishes to make funds available as soon as we receive them this current fiscal year. Otherwise, the driver that we're looking at, because we built the funds in the, it was added to the approved budget yesterday. So it's fully appropriated effective July 1 that we'll have the funds available to start, at least 50% to start with, and we'll get the second half in next fiscal year. So really the funds, if there's immediate priorities or immediate needs, like for example, if there was like an immediate, again, just throwing out examples, like if there was intent from the board to do some type of a grant program, a business grant program this immediate fiscal year, I think we would have to determine what that would look like, because there's some budgetary actions that we would have to take to appropriate those funds this current fiscal year and make those funds available. Otherwise, the way it's currently set up, the funds would not be fully appropriated and available to use until we got to July 1. So I'm thinking, that's a big question. It all depends on what the board has in mind for what you would like to make available upon receipt of the first allocation this current fiscal year. That would be something that we would want to concentrate on, because that's going to be a short time frame, because we've got 6 weeks left of the fiscal year. And then, so realistically, to get some of the other ideas, it all depends. It's kind of that direction you want to go. If you want to see more information and data collected and some estimates put together on what each of these categories are going to look like before you determine the priority on how much you want to make available, I think we're going to need a couple weeks to pull that information together. I know I'll need at least a couple weeks for the internal portion of it, just to connect with department heads and solicit feedback and identify some of the thoughts and ideas that they have. And I'm sorry, I lost track. I've got numbers running through my head. I'm in budget mode. So, or if you want to do something a little more to set more guardrails and parameters and come up with some percentages for each of those, identify those, I think we can do that relatively quickly, because I think that's ultimately up to the board. If you want to put in, percentages and kind of set some guardrails and prioritize that, I know that's difficult, because like Commissioner Burschauer would say, it's really hard to determine that until you see kind of the list of needs and projects. So I'm sorry, I'm in the chicken or the egg situation as far as a recommendation, but so I don't.
Fair.
Commissioner Burschauer, yes.
I think when I think of immediate needs, I think of our businesses first, and just folks in the community who are needing help in general. And then I guess my mind also goes to making sure that we know what the cities are planning, because it seems like if we come into that process too late, then it's not helpful for them. So those are the two things that stand out for me. I think internally, I don't really see anything, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anything internally that's just, we got to do it the day after we get the money. And then some of the external long-term projects, bigger projects like broadband or water or whatever, those don't seem to be very urgent and critical to the point where we would need immediate authority to get this stuff done. So those are kind of the two things for me that I would want to see, is if we're going to do business grants or if we're going to do community grants or whatever, let's get those done right away. And I think we've got to pull together our cities and say, okay, what are you guys thinking? So that we can better plan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Ken, to your question about, basically taking a look at how we want to structure this for this fiscal year, I think realistically, from the last round of grants, how long it took to get a check out. The process is so laborious because so much goes into it. It's not simply, writing a check. And so I think it would be safe to say, commissioners, unless anybody disagrees, that we're not going to be expending funds by before July 1. I don't know how we could unless there's something right now. Commissioner Kula?
Yeah, so the only two things that immediately come to mind, given how long it does take to advertise, say, a community grants or to service providers, nonprofits, businesses, and then to get the applications in, review them, and then cut checks. I think realistically we are past the end of our fiscal year. I'm seeing a little bit of a nod from Ken, but that's just what I've seen. Unless we really wanted to rush it, I would prefer to do it correctly or the best way possible rather than rush in this case. The two things though that come to mind is Ken. So one question for Ken, and then one probably question for Commissioner Berschauer. So I'll do the first one to Commissioner Berschauer. Is there an immediate need at the fairgrounds? And maybe that's a question for Ken too, but I know that you're a liaison, so I want to respect that.
I think, you know, because with the revenue, the reductions or impacts to revenues, I mean, that would be something, it's an eligible expense. And I think during the budget presentations you saw, you know, there were some, as part of presentations, some departments did present information about what they saw as revenue impacts to this current fiscal year. You know, that would be something that I have been soliciting from departments to get feedback on that, and you know, that information. So I could probably come back in the next couple of weeks with more definitive information about that, and maybe by then we'll actually have money in the account to have that discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Kula, in the Fair Board meetings, there is revenue loss, and that is contributing to being able to prepare for the fair. So, and I think it was Jessica that said the work crews are now back on. So that was great. I don't know if they're being immediately scheduled for help there, but that would be wonderful. I think the challenge would be, how do you pay for them, right? So there might be some immediate stuff there, but I think that it's more about preparing to have folks come in and use the event center and for the fair. So I don't have the numbers, but there's definitely a need.
Okay.
And well, I would just add that we know that we really didn't have a whole lot of preparation time to get the fairgrounds ready for evacuees. We don't know what this summer will bring, so we don't have a lot of time. So I would say that needs to be priority just in terms of really basic humanitarian aid, number one. Number two, that fair really has suffered, and it is an economic driver, and all the events that we haven't been able to. So I agree, that should be a priority. And if anything happens this fiscal year, that I would think would be it. And then also I would suggest that we reach out to our community partners and say, how has this impacted you? How are you struggling with services you can't provide? And then make that happen. But even if we were to make the fair a priority, I'm wondering if we could use some other funds to address that and then repay it with the art funds. Is that allowable?
I believe so, because we do have pandemic related incurred expenses that we have that went beyond just the CARES Act reimbursements that we had. And again, this is for responding to and mitigating to the public health emergency and addressing issues with reduction of revenue. So I do think, you know, that we could do it. You know, as an example, we were tracking, earlier we did a $64,000 transfer to the fairgrounds to help with restoring the maintenance position that they ended up not filling when that position went vacant during the fiscal year. And so there are some immediate, you know, the board took action to transfer those funds to help resolve that. I haven't received an update on where Jessica and Gary are at filling that position and utilizing those funds. So I can check in on that, but that's an example of some actions that were taken in response that it seems that would be eligible to use a portion of these funds to, because that wasn't the original intent of these funds. We diverted funds from another department to help offset, the challenges that the fairgrounds was having.
Ken, I'm wondering if it would be at all helpful and to totally understand that we can't possibly ask you to do all of this in a short amount of time, but maybe ask the commissioners if there is a short-term immediate need that you see in your contacts or in your community involvement, that we discuss those next week briefly, just sort of the overview. So let's say Commissioner Kula, you say there's a immediate need over here, and it is it's critical and it should be addressed. And then also vet that the city in whatever area is not going to be addressing that. And then we bring those to the discussion next week. And then we basically acknowledge that if it's not going to happen this fiscal year, our next discussions will involve the buckets. Is that?
Chair, I think that's a good way to look at it. In terms of like, let's get started, but let's continue to have substantive discussions about how to direct the money. I think that would be good. The one thing I wanted to ask, I forgot the question. The fairgrounds question was primarily directed at Commissioner Bershauer. The other question for Ken, if you don't mind, the Commissioner, was I wanted to ask, I think between you and Commissioner Sterrett, you mentioned Sarah Architects and the space needs analysis. Was there a second component of it that that could be funded this year? And how do you feel about that? Is that a good use of these funds from your perspective, getting that more information level?
I think, yes, I could do some evaluation, and we could, because there is that next step. We got provided a space needs analysis with a set of recommendations. So the next step is to engage with helping develop a plan on how to narrow on the recommendations on what needs to be implemented and how to go forward. And that would be something that we could explore right away.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then Commissioner Sterrett, you set up kind of a timeline, as it were, a schedule for us going forward. And I really appreciate that. I think that it would behoove us to continue checking in about this and making steps forward kind of on a weekly basis, even if it's just 15 minutes as part of our meeting. The one thing, I know it's somewhat it is arbitrary, but it's based upon seeing the external, some of the needs external to the county versus what I've heard from when I talk with Ken, whether 50-50 or a 40-60 for external versus internal would be a way to get started. And the reason I say like essentially half and half is that we all know that there are business needs out there. We all know that there are service provider needs out there that folks are struggling. And there's large scale things like broadband and childcare and the sewer and water infrastructure. But I also know that internal to the county, there's a lot of things that departments have never been able to do because they haven't had this, like, even if it's just the match, right, for a federal grant or a state grant, they've never had that, like, here's money that's outside of discretionary. So I got to put that out there. It's almost completely arbitrary, but it is based upon what I've seen of the funding and needs out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that maybe it can, when he brings us in order to get to that split, if Ken brings us, okay, these are 3 or 2 really important, really time sensitive, really expensive projects, and we don't know what they're going to cost, but we can give it a basic estimate. To be able to say 50-50, we might have more critical needs in the community, and I don't know what those are going to cost, but would we need to put those guardrails on and just see what comes in and say, wait a second, this has got to get more of our attention? Commissioner Bershauer?
Chair, I just wanted to, because maybe I had this conversation with Ken individually, but we were gonna, we determined that you would check in with all the departments and see if there was immediate needs. So I don't want to duplicate efforts if that's what's happening. The fairgrounds is kind of unique, but I know the sheriff, we did talk with the sheriff. He doesn't seem to have any immediate needs right now. So I want to make sure I'm not duplicating efforts there.
And I would just mention that I have a weekly department head meeting. So it's probably a little easier for me to solicit those ideas or have the conversations with the department heads and get their feedback. And then I can report back to the board.
Thank you. And I think sometimes our funds are so restricted and they do cover a lot of what we're doing. Like for instance, HHS, 96% of that comes from state and federal money. So our community partners who are doing some of the external social service work might really need an extra boost. And that's what I think I would want to focus on: the Safe Families, Lutheran, Provoking Hope, those folks, and see where YCAP is at, those types of things. So why don't we do this? Why don't we say that next week we'll come back with just a more refined approach or a more refined list of what we're looking at, and then we can go from there and maybe even come up with percentages based on that. And again, if we see critical needs, we should probably address those sooner rather than later. So. And then also give Ken a chance to take a breath, because this is getting to be a lot of money that you have to be responsible for. So if that's agreeable to everybody, we can move on. Anything else on this subject?
Chair, I wonder, speaking of the cities, I wonder how we would go about getting that information, whether we maybe schedule a meeting where they all come on and just talk to us about what's going on. I think that would be very helpful. I'd love to go visit them individually in person, but it's, given the circumstance, maybe it is better for us just to say, hey, on May 25th, at our BOC meeting, you're invited to come talk about what you're planning for your city and how we might be able to partner.
Yeah, I think, Ken was about to say something, but I wanted to call that out. As I think that would be probably inviting is a good way to do it, so that we don't have to do the kind of running all over communication channels. I did want to note that I am going to be, I have the request out there for information from cities about water and sewer specific projects, with the hope that I can get, the real summary numbers. But I think that even with that, it would still benefit all of us to hear in person, even about those. But Ken was going to say something.
Well, and I was thinking maybe the first, because I know that next week, because I wrote down that we were going to look at some of the immediate needs that may be right now that we need to address. And then maybe the second part as a suggestion would be to finalize, again, I'm sorry I wish I could have come up with a better analogy for it, but the buckets, and putting a name to those categories, because I think what we could do is we could organize work sessions around each of those categories. And then that way we could extend or identify folks in each of those categories to participate in the work session. So like if one of them that I had kind of identified as, if we're talking about infrastructure, countywide infrastructure, I'm not talking internal, but more of that external infrastructure, maybe that would be the point to extend an invitation to city representatives, find out how they're targeting the use of their allocation of those funds, where there's shortfalls, and being able to have that conversation with the board. At that time, it might be a way to kind of break up the work sessions on specific subjects on that priority to help kind of build the list of ideas and have that conversation.
Just to make sure that we're not spending a lot of time discussing this in discussion when we really just need to get to the bottom line, I'm wondering if it might be more effective time-wise for us to contact either the city managers, the mayors, and say, listen, do you have an idea? Do you have an idea now, ballpark? And would you be able to send that to us to take a look at? And then if we need to have a discussion, because discussion just for the sake of discussion, what we really need to know is what do you plan on doing with that? And then we need to compare that to what we would be able to add to it or not duplicate. So I just want to make sure we're not just having a meeting to have a meeting. So can we, and I would be happy to reach out to mayors, city managers and say, do you have an idea? Would you be able to send that to us so that we can take a look and see where we can help? Commissioner Kula, do you know if in your discussions that there have been that they are farther along the process in terms of what their wish list is than we are?
I do know that every mayor and city manager that I've heard from they all have long-term, long-known infrastructure projects that they haven't been able to fund, or they've been looking for USDA loans, and the payback, would double or triple sewer rates, things like that, where they know what they need to do. I don't want to call out specific cities. I know that one has DEQ is breathing down their neck because they need to do a project to satisfy DEQ and they haven't been able to fund it, for example. So I know that they have things that likely the American Rescue Plan direct allocations will go to. But, honestly, with the exception of the city of Newburgh and the city of McMinnville, the numbers are, 300,000 compared to a $3.5 million, they're getting 300,000 maybe, and they have a $3.5 million project. So I think that's obviously that's a situation where you have suggested, and I think that it's very worthwhile to see how we can help. And then I think that the just to go a little further, the local money and the county money is a really good position to be in if there are federal dollars for some of that. Ken mentioned that there was a capital fund within the American Rescue Plan. Ken, you know what I'm talking about? I forget the name of it, but it's like capital construction. So that might be an opportunity where we say, okay, City X, you've got this amount of money that you're comfortable dedicating to it. We can dedicate this and we'll go for this grant.
Correct. The capital fund that I was mentioning, it's another one of those categories that I haven't seen any details. In fact, that may be where a lot of the inquiries are coming from our local legislators, because I'm wondering if some of those funds are coming to the state, and it would, I haven't seen any clear direction on how jurisdictions are going to access those specific programs, because it's in addition to the direct allocations that we're receiving.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
thank you. Oh, sorry.
Chair, I just, in my fantasy land, I don't want to micromanage the cities. I don't know if that's going to be possible because of whatever reporting requirements, but ideally we would just say, okay, you've got a $10 million project and you've only got 5 million, we'll match you and good luck, have fun. That's probably not going to happen, but we'll see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There will be some reporting requirements, I assume, but leaving it up to them once we decide that it's something that meets our policies, right? Our policy priorities.
So do you think it would be, again, I want to make sure we're not just sitting here week after week after week. We really need to just get down to exactly what we want to do. So as far as the cities go, I know Commissioner Kula, you're going to be zeroing in on the big ticket water quality, water infrastructure types of, which seem to be really the difficulty for so many of our cities, those types of projects. And then also finding out if there one particular catch point for what they plan on doing with it and what their request to us would be. So maybe what we could do is and I don't know, I'd be happy to reach out to them and say, look, when you decide what it is what you plan on doing and you find that you have a need, could you let us know? That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to cut a check, but once you've basically shown us we get $5 million, we're going to be spending $5 million on this, we're $2 million short or something. Because what I don't want to happen is that we run to the rescue to shore up some cities that might be using money instead of putting it towards an important project, using it for a variety of different things, and then we're sort of trying to backfill all these little projects. So I just want to make sure those funds get used first before the county's funds get expended.
Yeah, I definitely hear you. I feel like Dave Hagerberg called it the last money in kind of thing, which hopefully that's what our allocation could be, right? Is that last to get them over the hurdle.
Right. So
And
I'd be
I was
happy.
gonna
Go
I
ahead.
was gonna ask, no, I just you brought up it was a long list of like family and child related organizations. And I wondered whether, and so that made me think, I remember that the Relief Nursery, one of their kind of ongoing needs is that they don't get funding from the state for capital improvements. And so that's why they have to do fundraising and asks from us, for example. And I wonder whether, I know that you value this and it's a priority for you and it's a priority for me. And I'm gonna, I don't want to speak for Commissioner Berschauer, but I wonder if the reaching out to some of these organizations to find out about their infrastructure needs would be something you would be willing to do on behalf of the board.
Yes, Commissioner, and I have done that. And I have some specific information, for instance, from Lutheran regarding relief nurseries and what their needs are. And the other consideration is we have to remember that we have our state legislators that have reached out to us and offered money for different projects. And Representative Noble reached out yesterday, and his question is, we've got these specific needs, and his focus, as my focus has been, is basically youth and addiction. So really, that pot of money can help us address some of those needs that we might not have to use ours for. So yes, I think it will be important. So what I will do is I will get an update from the various partners, for instance, like Lutheran and Provoking Hope, and get an idea of what they might need. And then also reach out to the cities and say, can you give us an update on where you're at so that we can factor that into our bottom line?
That's great. Oh, Ken, I was going to ask another question, but Ken has his.
Ken, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. I just wanted to, because there was a question about, or questions about, how we make the funds available and processes. I do think we have some options available because, under the rules, we do have the ability to transfer the funds. So there's a couple different options to kind of keep in mind. You can look at doing like a solicitation, like a grant program. Let's just say we make $1 million available for this grant and organizations can apply, and then we go through the solicitation and awarding, we go through a grant solicitation process. The other option that you could have in mind too, like let's just say as an idea, something to have in mind, let's say you wanted to put a certain amount to assist local jurisdictions with capital infrastructure needs. You could come up with a percentage, a dollar amount, and you could essentially, much along the same lines that we received our ARPA, you could come up with a formula and just do, hey, we've determined we have $500,000 available to this city, available to go towards any capital projects that you have. So there's a couple different options you can look at it. You can do a solicitation grant type, which then we would have grant agreements in place, and we would do the follow-up and the reporting, and that would be consistent with the Treasury guidelines that we've seen. Or you could do like a direct allocation of the funds and just say, hey, city of, McMinnville, we have this amount of funds available to assist with infrastructure projects, and we would enter into an agreement to an IGA to track that transfer, and then we would report that transfer, and to the Treasury we would track that. And so there's a couple different means to get the funding out to outside entities. And so I just wanted to quickly just highlight that I think that is consistent with the Treasury guidance that I have seen so far.
Chair, if I might.
Yes, thank you.
I was going to ask, first of all, I should check with Commissioner Bershauer too. I want to make sure that we're all in support of something like what I asked whether you'd be willing to do, which was to reach out about childcare and child infrastructure. Commissioner Bershauer, does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention one little comment. My instinct on this stuff is with the cities is to concentrate a bit heavier on our rural cities, because they just by nature have a lack of resources to access further funds maybe than Newburgh or McMinnville do. So and as part of the percentages, they're just getting less of the pie. So that in the back of my mind, that's kind of where my instinct goes, is to maybe focus our dollars a little bit heavier on the rural cities.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you on that. I mean, just looking at the percentages, it's hard to do anything significant, unfortunately, especially with infrastructure with 350,000 compared to 7 million. So absolutely. And it actually goes parallel. The second agenda item on our Water Task Force meeting is to talk about mercury total maximum daily load limits. And that is something where the county is actually responsible for stormwater management now in small cities in Yamhill County. So there is, we end up taking responsibility for some of that. And I think it's appropriate for us to make sure that they get our help too, or our funding. The one thing I wanted to check in with both commissioners then is whether, since Commissioner Bershauer, you're the liaison for economic development, and you have a lot of experience in this area, what I wondered whether the Commissioner Starrett and you would be willing for you and Abisha to work together to see what kind of, I guess, business and worker support or opportunities there are out there. The needs, I mean, she knows the needs of business owners, but I also hear her regularly talking about the needs of workers, whether it's to get back into the workforce, or some of the trying to figure out why there some workers aren't returning beyond unemployment benefits, or beyond having kids that they have to have at home. So I don't know whether you'd be willing to do that, and that would, I guess that would be one of by you reaching out and finding out that stuff, that would also be an indicator of our priorities, right? So that's why I want to make sure that this is something that makes sense to everybody. That was a long way of saying, hey, are we in agreement that Commissioner Bershauer would work with Abisha?
Yeah, no, that's fine. That was on my list as well. And just to kind of get a recap of what happened last year, who we reached, what were the pots of money and the focuses, and then how we can go forward as well. So that's definitely on my list, as is the broadband conversation, as well as to how the said core might be involved in that too.
And I think it'd be really important for us to include our local chambers and some of our industry advocates to talk, like, for instance, getting Orla involved, or and definitely our chamber in McMinnville has been really such a great advocate for businesses. So yeah, that would be important. Find out who needs what, and then try to address that. And then I'll reach out to I'm going to go with city managers, because they probably have a bead on some of the projects that they have been looking at, and then also the again, the community partners that really do have significant needs right now. So then we can come back next week, have a little bit more discussion, and then plan on down the road giving Ken a little bit more direction on percentages and things like that. Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to department updates. We have none.
And thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. On to old business I, on to other business J. And this is J1, the consideration of approval of an intent to award a construction contract to Sierra Santa Fe Corporation for the Yamhill County 2021 chip seal project in the amount of $49,548. Commissioner Kula, did you want to address this, or is this something that we need Christian for?
Oh, no, I think that's, I mean, if Christian wants to weigh in, I'm sure that he would probably be happy to. It is $549,000 though, I just want to note. And Director Lago presented, or at least that's what it says in my agenda. Director Lago presented to us a little while back the capital improvement project list, and it included things like total road reconstruction, overlays, and chip seals. And the chip seal is the one that's going to go the furthest for the amount of money, the furthest number of miles. And this is a return. We don't have the equipment anymore, so we need to work with an outside vendor. But in future years, Director Lago's hope is that we can work with other counties using their equipment and vice versa. So this is a great example of the future is before us.
Thank you. Christian?
And Madam Chair, this is simply the notice of intent to award. I'll be working with Public Works to bring the contract back for final consideration by the board in the next week or two.
Okay, we have a, do we have a motion to consider and intend to award the contract to Sierra Santa Fe Corporation in the amount of $549,548?
I move that we approve item J1.
We have a motion to approve J1. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. On to item J2, consideration of approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Yamhill County and the state of Oregon for the statewide emergency notification OR alert initiative retroactive to January 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2026. And basically this has been sort of a gift that we did have our own emergency alert, Yamhill alert system after many years of realizing the need for that. And this is basically going to be just replacing the cost that we would spend for essentially the same system. And Brian Young, Sergeant Young, our emergency manager, says that he has no concerns about this and that he believes that all of the controls that allow us to have autonomy over this will still be in place. So if there are no other questions, I would move approval of item I2.
So moved.
Any further discussion?
I only want to say that it's been really great seeing a little bit more information coming out of the alerts. I think for me, at least, it reminds me this is what we have and this is the value of it.
I guess no news is good news. So when you don't get one, there's no major catastrophe. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Christian?
Just wanted to clarify, this would actually be item J2, not I2.
J2. All right.
Yes,
We have a motion to approve item J2. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. On to item J3, consideration of adopting resolution 21-5-05-06-1, proclaiming May 2021 as Older Americans Month, and I will read that. Whereas older adults have persevered through their lives, developing resilience and strength through successes, challenges, joys, and unforeseen circumstances, this Older Americans Month, we celebrate the strength of older adults and the Aging Network with special emphasis on the power of connection and engagement in building strong communities. And whereas Yamhill County recognizes that connecting with others plays a vital role in the health and well-being of our communities and engaging older adults through education, recreation, and service, and promoting connecting people with opportunities to share their time, experience, and talents. And whereas Yamhill County joins Clatsop, Marion, Polk, and Tillamook counties, which Northwest Senior and Disability Services in recognizing May as Older Americans Month and recognizes that a growing number of older Americans make vital contributions within our communities every day. And whereas Yamhill County recognizes the importance of physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being of older adults and promotes opportunities to support them in our communities. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, on behalf of the citizens of Yamhill County, hereby recognizes the month of May as Older Americans Month and urge all citizens to recognize older adults and the people who serve them as essential and valuable members of Yamhill County. Done this 6th day of May 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
I would move that we approve item J3.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt this resolution. And I just want to add that as far as Northwest Senior and Disability Services, working with these other counties, they do a wonderful job of reaching out to seniors who have absolutely no connections, not only a congregate meal, but home delivery, investigations into elder abuse, helping them with financial fraud considerations, but they've done a wonderful job and grateful for their work. So we do have a motion, and I'm sort of losing track.
No, just thank you for bringing this forward.
All right, so, okay, no further discussion, motion passes.
Or let's yeah.
Sorry, I'm actually punchy after the last 3 days. Okay.
Well, you read it, so thank you for reading it.
A motion to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, well, moving right along. I believe we have another resolution, and Commissioner Berschauer, I haven't forgotten about the Sheridan Japanese School. We'll put that on as well. The next one is item 4, and this is the consideration of adopting resolution 21-05-06-2, proclaiming May 9th through the 15th, 2021 as National Economic Development Week. And find that here. Alrighty, I'll read that. In the matter of resolution recognizing May 9th to the 15th as National Economic Development Week, whereas economic developers promote economic well-being and quality of life for their communities by creating, retaining, and expanding jobs that facilitate growth, enhance wealth, and provide a stable tax base, and whereas economic developers stimulate and incubate entrepreneurism in order to help establish the next generation of new businesses, which is the hallmark of the American economy, and whereas economic developers are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural and urban, local, state, provincial, and federal governments, public-private partnerships, chambers of commerce, universities, and a variety of other institutions, and whereas economic developers attract and retain high-quality jobs, develop vibrant communities, and improve the quality of life in our region. And whereas the economic developers in Yamhill County are focused on accelerating the growth in living wage jobs, maintaining the positive business climate, expanding talent and attraction efforts, ensuring that Yamhill County is a leader in hospitality and place-based tourism, improve infrastructure to better serve local businesses, visitors, and residents. And whereas these economic Vitality partners do everything they can to support our local businesses, helping them through, the hurdles of startups, nurturing their growth, and celebrating their longevity. And whereas economic developers work in the county of Yamhill within the state of Oregon, and now therefore it is hereby resolved that the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, on behalf of the citizens of Yamhill County, hereby recognizes the week of May 9th through the 15th, 2021 as National Economic Development Week, and reminds all individuals of the importance of this community celebration, which supports the expansion of career opportunities and an improved quality of life. Done the 6th day of May 2021. Do we have a motion to approve or adopt this resolution?
So moved.
The motion to adopt the resolution. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion passes. On to item J. Where are we? We are up to J5, consideration of the submission of revised application for the 21-22 Yamhill County Assessment Function Funding Assistance or CAFA grant application in the amount of $2,772,471, rescinding Board Order 21-151. And we heard about this, was it last week? Christian?
Uh,
Okay.
Yeah, we got an update from the assessor this week. The state actually asked that they remove one portion of what they had included in their budget. So what this reflects, or in their CAF application, this reflects a reduction of $73,500. And that's really the only change. So rather than amend the previous application, they've submitted a revised application. So that's the reason why we're rescinding the prior action and then adopting this revised application.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve item J5.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve item J5. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. On to item J6, which is the Sheridan Japanese School, a letter of support. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have Kim Hamblin in the audience or attendees. I don't mean to put her on the spot, but it might be, if she's willing, it might be nice to hear from her. I was just going to, in response to her letter, I was going to suggest that I can draft one from the commission as a whole. And then if either Chair, if you have a personal experience with the school, or Commissioner Kula, if you do as well, that would be nice to include in there. I had the pleasure of meeting one of the students at the McMinnville Civil Air Patrol awards night. So, and it was very clear that these students are very attached to this school and were feeling a bit distraught as to their future. So if there's any sort of personal experiences that you would like to have me include, then I would be happy to do that.
Yes, I would be in support of a letter of support. It was a little shocking to find out that the school was in jeopardy. I always thought of that as such an asset to the community. So I would be in favor of that. Do we need a motion to approve?
And it looks like Kim did have her hand up. I don't know if that's something we want to.
Okay.
It's down though now.
Okay. All right.
I feel like somebody should go out in the lobby and see what
There we
Carrie's up to.
Okay.
She's back.
All right. Carrie, could you promote Kim? Kim Hamblin is joining us. If you wanted to make a statement in support of the school. Thanks for being here, Kim.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, you guys. It might be a little loud. I'm actually bottling right now in the cidery. I was listening to you on my headphones. Yes, it was actually a shock to all of us too. And a bunch of parents have gotten together and are working on a big, huge revitalization plan to bring the school back and bring it back within its budgetary constraints. And you know, it has been running a little bit under budget, or over budget actually. So the last few years. So, and with COVID, it just took a bigger hit than they were expecting. We still have quite a bit in reserve. So we're hoping to get the school back in budget and run it like it should be run, and dial everything back in. So yeah, I think the group that we have that are working on it are super dedicated. We were able to raise $23,000 from the community with pledges of $40,000 over the next 5 years in just the last 6 days. So people really want to see the school go. And so I'm happy to share any other letters or the finances with you guys too. But thank you for your support.
Well, thank you for fighting for the school. School choice is more important than it has ever been. And that school's really been kind of a game changer for a lot of kids in that community. I know I don't even know how many years now. It's been a long time.
About 20.
It's a public school too, so it's
Yeah.
part of the public school system. So it's already funded by our tax dollars, and
Yeah.
we like to have those options for people who can't afford to go to private school. And you know, it would leave a significant gap. So I think it's great.
Yes.
So thank you for support.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner Bershauer. I know school choice is big, and charter schools and variety and options has been something that you've worked for a long time on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. And they do, charter schools receive less funding per student overall than a traditional public school. So I think this is, worth lending whatever weight we can put behind the support. And, if they have further needs as well, then we can look at that too.
All right. Okay, so you'll draft that letter. Thanks, Kim. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
efforts. So
Thanks,
you'll
Kim.
draft that letter?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All righty.
Shall we, Commissioner, Chair Sarah, should we move to approve that?
Do we need a vote on that, Christian? Will we need a motion to approve that letter, or is that just a consensus item?
That is entirely up to the board. If you have a draft letter that you're ready to adopt, you certainly can consider it.
Or maybe talk.
Kim, I think you're still
Oh, hi.
Carrie, could
Hi,
you?
wow.
Carrie,
Thank you.
maybe, yeah, thanks, Carrie, the gatekeeper.
What she was saying may be much more extreme than what I'm about to say, but it's up to you. If you've got a draft letter or a concept in mind that the board feels ready to vote on, you could do that. Otherwise, if there's a consensus, if it still needs to be drafted, then it could be circulated, and those commissioners who are willing to sign on can sign on to it at that point. It's really up to the board. Sounds like there's pretty unanimous support of this, and so it's really up to you.
All right, then I'll just go ahead and entertain a motion to approve a letter of support for the Sheridan Japanese School.
I would move that we approve a letter of support for the Sheridan Japanese School drafted by Commissioner Bershauer.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Public hearings, we have none. Item K, do we have any announcements?
just a point of clarification, Chair. Who do I send that letter to so it can be distributed? I don't know that I've actually drafted a letter yet.
Ken? Is that? Well, Ken gets letter and Carrie and Carolina, I would imagine.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's being routed the right way.
Yeah, if you want to draft it and then either Carrie or Carolina, they do their magic on, putting it on letterhead and getting the signature lines and everything updated, and then we can circulate it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements?
Chair, I had announcements last week, but we've moved on from that world. So if things come up again based upon meetings that I was in, I will be sure to let you know. It looks like Christian has something though.
Christian's been making valiant efforts by going like this. This is a rough group. You're going to need to be.
Just getting in line, and I promise it's not soccer related. Although if you'd like to talk about soccer, happy to do that. While we were in the meeting, I got a reminder email from Greg Blond, who's with our bond counsel, regarding next week's Hospital Facilities Authority. There's been a request made that the board possibly consider capping our issuer fee. As a reminder, historically, we have charged 90 cents per thousand of the bond amount. So because this is such a large bond amount, the issuer fee could be as high as approximately $135,000 if we stuck with our 90 cents per thousand. So Greg just asked if the board might be willing to consider, at the request of Friendsview as well, capping the fee. We can talk about the different levels. As an example, he said the Multnomah County Hospital Authority often caps their fees at $50,000. Or we don't have to cap our fee at all, and we can stick with our 90 cents per thousand and charge the 135,000. So I wasn't sure I was going to have a chance to chat about this with you each individually, so I'm sorry to throw another numbers question at you after the last 3 days, but and whatever number you agree to would be reflected in the Hospital Facility Authority resolution that would be adopted next week. So we don't need a formal action by the board today, just an idea of whether or not you would be willing to consider capping that fee, and if you had a number, then we could put that number in the resolution for formal consideration next week.
Thank you, Kristen. Just to be consistent, what have we typically done in the past when we've been asked for a cap?
We haven't been asked for a cap before. We've been asked for a reduction. And we have on a couple of occasions on some smaller issuances reduced the fee. We've never had an issuance quite this large. So I don't know that we have a past practice that we could easily look to.
But when we were asked for that reduction, how low did we go?
I'd have to go back and look, and I can certainly find out.
I just want to make sure that when we do these, we're consistent and it sort of relates to what we've done in the past.
Yeah, like I said, this is the largest one we've done, so I don't know that we have something to compare it to. But if you'd like, I can find that out, and then I can reach out to each of you individually after this meeting and continue that conversation. I'm just not sure I'm going to be able to find that information right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Kula.
Oh, no, Chair, I just wanted to say that sounds good to me, to have him reach out to us individually with that. And thank you for asking about that.
And it would be appropriate to also discuss this with the full authority board next Thursday as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Christian and Ken, I'm hoping that in our Tuesday meeting, we can go over this because you guys are speaking a foreign language to me. So
yeah, happy to. And if you'd like, I can send you as much or as little of the documentation as you'd like. These, as you can imagine, are pretty detailed, complex financial investment transactions. There's pages and pages and pages of various agreements and lots of emails floating around. The one thing that generally pops to the top of my mind and the commissioners as well is what sort of potential exposure or liability do we have if something were to go wrong with this financial transaction? And the answer is none. We are agreeing to exercise our statutory authority to act as the conduit bond issuer for Friendsview. We've done it in the past for Friendsview. We've done it for George Fox, and we did it recently for Linfield as well. All of the proceeds and all of the money would be repaid strictly out of the assets of the borrower, which is Friendsview. And there's lots of indemnification language and protection built into the documents to make sure that the county is not ultimately responsible to pay back any of these amounts. It doesn't count again. It's not considered a general obligation of the county. It doesn't count against our full faith and credit. And so it's simply a recognized process under statute that allows us to assist nonprofits, higher education institutions to take advantage of some either tax exempt or tax reduced bond financing authority. But yeah, happy to talk about it more next Tuesday.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else?
Thank you.
Yes. Kristen, did you have something else? No. I see that look on your face. That glazed over look.
I won't talk about the great success the Timbers had in making it to the CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinals, although they did lose last night. But
Carrie, feel free to mute.
Thanks, everybody. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. And again, thanks to everybody for a hard